Hello, kind people. This is Dmitry, and today we're reviewing this puzzle by Eck called Listen, which I'm sure is going to end up in top 3 of puzzles of the year when Listener Dinner comes next March. And in fact, I believe this is probably the current frontrunner for puzzle of the year. But more on that later, and my opinion, let's reserve this till the end of this video. Eck is at Hull, and Eck made his debut in the main Times Daily crossword on the same day as this puzzle was published. But this is not his first listener. In fact, last year he already made top 3 with the puzzle called Ready Now, about Sunset Boulevard. Premier League setter, and we are to expect a great puzzle, and the grid looks completely mental. So let's have a look at the preamble, which is not too easy either. So clues are given in normal order. Bars would have 180 symmetry but must not be shown. In 39 clues a letter is misprinted. Corrections spell information about certain objects reshaped to fit in the grid, and hints for extracting a 9-word set of instructions from them. 8 cells, only one checked, would need to contain 2 letters for answers to fit. 1 letter must be omitted from each to leave new words. The omitted letters can form the object's name. The remaining 10 clues need 1, 2, 3 consecutive words removed to enable solving. 9 of the extras define an altered entry. The positions of the entry's surviving letter in their definition give, in clue order of the definitions, word lengths for the above instruction set. The other extra phrase is the home of all these thematic objects. Solvers must follow all instructions to show an adapted quotation in the final grid. The title may be read as help following one of the instructions. Oof. This was quite a preamble, right? So, as usual, half of what it means is not you don't understand until you get to it, so let's start with the half that is more understandable. So clues are given in the normal order, and bars would have 180-degree symmetry, but we know that 8 cells need to contain 2 letters for answers to fit, and so we immediately see that instead of the usual symmetry in the lengths of the crosses, right, we expect, so here is 7, 6, 6, so we expect to see 7, 6, 6 here, but it doesn't happen. And because it doesn't happen, we immediately realize that, this is the entry with an extra letter, and this is an entry with an extra letter. And similarly, then 7, 7, 6, 7, 7, 6 is correct, and then we have 6, 7, 6, 6, and so again, like this 7 is one with an extra letter in it. And then we have 5, 5, 5, 4. So that means that, again, like here, there is an extra letter. And here we have 7, 6, 7. So we already managed to identify 4 of the 9 entries with extra letters in them. So there are only 8 cells where 2 letters are needed, but one of them is checked, so that corresponds to 2 different entries, and all the rest corresponds to just 1 entry. So we identified 4 out of 9 by doing so. And this is how you could start to, position some of the entries in the grid. So for example, we realize that this is the midpoint, and so hopefully that means that you can put the bars. So the grid is 9 by 18. And so the midpoint is here, and so this is the mid row, and so this entry goes there, right? Because it's a 6-letter entry in the middle. And then you can try to somehow sort these entries into the remaining rows. And since we believe that it's unlikely that both of those have their extra letters, we can assume that those are, and we need to be ready to retract that assumption if needed, but we can assume for the moment that both of those 7s are correct, and if they are correct, then none of them fit here, because this is just 6 cells, and so this 7 has to go somewhere well, maybe here, or maybe somewhere else, but on the previous row. And that means that you're only left with just 4 rows for, all those entries. And that doesn't leave all that much freedom. So for example, you can probably think that the 666 just fill the whole top row, and so there are bars there, and so on. Now, the puzzle is so complicated and the end game is so crazy that we kind of need to move to it reasonably quickly. But I really want to point out that the grid fill was one of the hardest grid fills in quite a while. And it is mostly just due to the quality of clues. I really, really, really enjoyed this clue set. And I think of the puzzles of the year so far, there are 2 puzzles with this outstanding quality of the clue set that I really enjoy. So this one and the one by Paddock. So maybe I should talk about some of these. And mostly it's just to very imaginative use of this misprints and extra words. So the reason why it's not easy is always because if you have more than one clue type and you don't need, with very different gimmicks, you always sort of question yourself about, which one you're looking at. And obviously this being carte blanche, you can't immediately write things in. So I don't even know, what should we look at? Here I don't, I didn't, have a record of, which ones I solved first. But it took me about 3 days just to complete the grid fill, and then another couple of days for the end game. So I probably would just skip the grid fill completely and show you the outcome of that. Although there were lots of very... I did take photos of my grid. I solved it on paper. Well, not the end game as you'll see, but I did the grid fill on paper, and I did take photos of my intermediate stages, and there were some very nice sort of discoveries there. I think the main one was when at some point I realized that basically this 5 does actually end up on the last row. In fact, this was Beard. Bred furiously 2 protects 1, and Beard is on with an A. So this was a typo, and I think it went up somewhere here. And once you realize that this is a 5 and you have 3 6s going after them, you immediately you then immediately know that all 3 of those are with extra letters. And then you almost immediately realize that basically from the state the grid was by then, I knew that they have to be somewhere. Where were they? Sorry, they were here, there, and there. So these 3 entries were in fact with an extra letter. And moreover, I knew that the only place... So as I said before, right, neither this nor that is actually occupied. And so this turns out to be the only unchecked row for all those entries. And so I immediately realized that these 3 cells must be the ones with the double letters, and that was very pleasing. So anyway, there were lots of moments like that, and that actually helped, because at some point then I realized which letters I was looking for, especially when I was down to the last clue, which was one of those 2, either this one or that one. And when you know which one you're looking for, it helps you. So I knew that what the dropped letter from that cell has to be. So anyway, this is what the filled grid looks like. So here I put both of the letters in, and we know that we need to create an extra word, so Biffin becomes Biffin, Leon becomes Lin, Gerard becomes great. Here, both of those were possible, right? And so we had to actually look for the definitions. So here are all the extra letters and extra words and phrases from the clues. So as you can see, this fondly actually defines the new entry dearly, and so this becomes dearly, which means fondly. And similarly, like from this bushels and cells, you drop an L and you get cells and bushes, cells being self or eagers in Caledonia, Scottish word for self, I think, and bushes are this thing which I'm not sure how to pronounce is the example of a bush, or bushes because it's a plural. And so went post he defines haired, and so we know that we now need to actually drop O from here and we end up with haired and not ored, and so on. And so this becomes of use from this clue, and this is and thus you it's not style, and so on. And again, here there is a choice, and you need to take W because the brobising means cowing. Non-native speaker, sorry. And then you realize that what actually happens here is you get polygons as the dropped letters. And then this is the set of the objects. And then the only extra thing that is not defining anything is Saturday Review. Saturday Review is the section of the Times on Saturday in which the listener crossword itself, this very crossword, is printed. And along with lots of other puzzles, which will become relevant, as we'll see. So what is the hidden message that we get? 9-letter ones, round moose, keys start, zeta ends. Or key starts, zeta ends. So 9-letter ones, round moose, key starts, zeta ends. So in order to understand what this is, we need to know what a polygon puzzle is in the Times. And this is one of those puzzles, I believe they're also edited by Roger Phillips, who is editing the Listener, where it's somewhat similar to Spelling Bee in New York Times, where you have a central letter and a bunch of outer letters arranged in a polygon, and you need to construct as many words as possible using the outer letters and always including the central ones. And I believe, unlike Spelling Bee, you can't repeat the letters. So let's try and find these polygons in the grid. But first, let's deal with this surviving letter in the definition, giving word lengths and blah, blah, blah. So in the order of the definition. So here the definition is fondly, and it's defining dearly. So dearly, L was the surviving letter out of those two, and so L is positioned at number 5 in the definition. It's the 5th letter of the word fondly. Similarly here, bushes, this was the surviving letter S, and this is the 3rd letter of the word in this clue, and in this definition. Similarly in haired, H is 9th. So we get 5, 3, 9, and here we have 3, and here we have W is 4, and here we have U is 3, and here we have N, which is 8, and here we have G, which is the 3rd, and here again we have S, which is the 4th. So our enumeration is 5, 3, 9, 3, 4, 3, 8, 3, 4. So we need this instruction set. Now, if we look back at the grid, and probably the empty grid is better for that, we notice that all these letters in the grid, they could be capital Greek letters. There are kappas, and then there are and Kais, where are they? There. And moos and news and so on. So where are the moos? So we can see that the moos are actually, they have some structure to their positions. And indeed, around each moo, we can see a chi and a z, right? So we can construct these polygons around them, and they look beautifully here. And now we need to extract these words from them. So we need a 5-letter word from the first one, which starts at E, because this is where the chi is, ends with this E where the Z is, and includes S in the middle. And with a little bit of luck, you could get the word erase. Now, for the second one, it's very easy, because it's only 3 letters. So our enumeration was 5, 3, 9, something, something. So with 3 letters, you don't have any choices. You start here, you end there, and you need to take that. So that is erase all. Now this is the 9-letter one. So for 9-letter one, you just anagram and you get erase all, obfuscate. And here you need to start at this and add here. So, and it is, so what do you need? You need 5393. So obfuscate eta. From here you need 4, so this becomes, starts here, ends here, S includes R, so it's S-O-R-T, sort. Then from this one you get out. This is an 8-letter one, so it's an anagram without 1 letter, so sort out code word. And here you get 3-letter use, and from here you get a 4-letter one, beta. So here is our message. Erase all, obfuscate eta, sort out code word, use beta. What on earth is all of this about? Well, if you erase everything and you get to and you obfuscate or block out or shade all of the etas, and here they are, right? This is what a capital eta looks like. You could get to this. And this looks very much like a crossword grid. And indeed it is a grid for another puzzle in Saturday Review called Code Word. And in the code word, and you might have noticed here that all the letters with H, they don't have any numbers associated with them. And all the other squares in the grid, they have. So once you do that, you end up with a code word. And the code word is a puzzle where each number in the grid just corresponds, so the letters of the English alphabet are encoded. One is a one-to-one encoding, or at least I'm not sure whether all of them are used here. Can't remember whether I've seen 26. Maybe one of them is not used and it's only 25, or maybe I'm just not seeing 26 and it is there. I think in the times typically they try to use them all. Oh yeah, there's 26. No, of course they use them all. Yeah. So so numbers from 1 to 26 encode letters of the English alphabet somehow, and we need to find how. And so and we need to reconstruct the grid. And in fact, this is where the title could help us. I ended up not using this hint, but it would probably make life easier. So listen here actually should be read as L is 10. And so that means that we could put some of the L's in the grid, like this. And if we do that, then, suddenly this becomes easier. So you could realize that this, I think, becomes something like a letter, and this becomes something like a little, right? So we can see that T becomes 7, and we get a whole bunch of letters now. So now we can fill all the 8s are E's, and so on. So what happens once you fill this? Well, you end up with a grid which looks like that. And now the the other bit in the message said, sort out code word use beta. So now, if we look at the entries which start with betas, what do we get? Well, we get erase all but tau entries, solve letter sudokus, use kappa. Whoa, so now we have to erase everything from this grid apart from the tau entries, and we then end up with something that looks like this. And I already split the grid into 3x3 boxes. So you can see all the letters that remain are the same letters as in this grid, and the only ones, and I only left the ones which have the letter tau in them. So now this is a letter Sudoku which we can solve, right? So for example, you can notice that in this box we need to place an O. It can't go here, it can't go here, it can't go there, so it has to be there, and so on. So I admit I was lazy and I solved the left one by hand, and I put the right one in the Sudoku solver, and I did this, and then the message was erase all but all entries, use kappa. Solve letter Sudokus, use kappa. So now in this grid we need to use the letters with kappas in them, and they tell us, unsurprisingly by now, erase, and now it's becoming more and more shorthand because we already know we're erasing everything. So now it says erase, enter original news. And so throughout this process I was hoping that the original grid will make a comeback somehow, and so it does. So now we go back to the original grid and we look at where are the news on it. And so here is, oops, sorry. So here is one, here is another one, here is another one, and so on. So once you do that, you get, these are the original news, and you you get a quotation out of them, and it is in Latin, and I don't really know how to pronounce Latin properly. I was taught it for a few years at school, but that was ages ago, and I don't think it's a very, especially like the last word, I'm a little bit confused about. But basically, sia enigma requiris circumspice, don't know how to pronounce this. Anyway, so this is an altered quotation from the monument to Sir Christopher Wren in St. Paul's Cathedral, which is the altered version where there is a monumentum instead of enigma, translates as, if you're looking for a monument, basically look around. And so here there is an enigma instead. So I believe this, after all this roller coaster, this is the final grid that we need to submit. Wow, I mean, what a journey. So what do I think about this? I mean, obviously this is not the first puzzle where the crossword grid is then transformed into something else. And in fact, 3 years ago, Twin won Ascot Gold Cup for a puzzle where it did transform into a Sudoku, just one Sudoku. Here we have two Sudokus and a bunch of other stuff. So I imagine this probably is sort of one up on that. My only issue here is that, like, this transition here I found absolutely astonishing. So getting from this code word to this letter Sudoku and then to the messages from them. But then I realized that, I mean, one issue I have with this is that it looks like all this, like, I really loved this step as well. And of course, this is very much tied to the original grid, but still via something. So all the indications are external to the original solve, right? All these Greek letters that are put in the grid are, sometimes you do have 2 or even 3 of them in the grid. And so that seems to be rather detached from the original grid fill, which I found also very beautiful, the original grid fill. So, and from this point on, you sort of erase everything, and you're using this message, but then in order to create this code word, you are using 0 information from the original grid. This is a whole separate puzzle, right? Which just uses this extra numbers and letters which were imposed on the grid and have nothing to do with the original solve. So I was really hoping that the original grid would then make a comeback. And it kind of did when obviously we had to enter the original news. But it did it in a very weak sense, right? Because this original news is basically we're just picking individual letters from the original grid. And it could have been done in many different ways. Like, for example, like instead of this thing here, right? This N could be here, right? And I don't think it would change the puzzle at all, right? Because this news were not used in any way up until this moment. And so this would be an equally valid construction, resulting in the exact same answer. So it kind of looks like there were these 2 puzzles. One, the original grid plus with the polygons, and the other code word, which turns into Sudoku. And this, and the connection between them is very, very loose. Still, I think it's an absolutely stunning construction, and I enjoyed it immensely. So, if one is nitpicking, you could also probably think that, like, once you try to isolate, when you have the original grid fill, instead of going through all the stages, you can then try to just, go through letters one by one. And once you get to news, you could probably recognize this as a Latin quotation sort of without doing anything else. Now, of course, you would still need to get somehow to the instruction that you need to erase everything but the letters of this quotation rather than, say, highlight them or something. So you probably still would need to go through this whole process. But there is probably that to say as well. And also, like, on a personal level, I think, although I enjoyed a lot of puzzles of this nature, like KG1, another listener with also a theme which was, in some sense, this is almost like themeless, right? Because it doesn't have a grounding in any sort of real world fact or story. And I do admire these puzzles, but I think, like, personally, I prefer when listeners do tell some sort of story coming from the real world. So, we had plenty of those this year as well. So, I mean, I guess, like, personally, it would definitely make my top 3 for the puzzle of the year. But I would probably, like, not. I think my AGC vote, if I ever do get one, will probably, like, my top place will go elsewhere, I guess. But yeah, maybe I will reevaluate it and value it even higher, like, come December. That is definitely possible. I would also be rather curious to read the Setters blog. So many thanks, Ed, for an absolute stunner. And yeah, I hope that we'll get many more egg puzzles in the Listen and the Magpie. And as a side comment, so Ed's main Times Cryptic appeared on Friday, and so Friday is the day when Simon from Cracking the Cryptic live solves them. And when Simon did live solve it, he didn't know that it was by Ed, and so he tried to guess the set and guessed Ed as John Guyver, which I think is more or less like the highest praise one could give to the Times setter, John Guyver being the absolute legend of listener as well as Shackleton. He won 3 AGCs in a row, and I think there is every chance that this one will be a start of similar streak by Ed. So yeah, thank you for watching, and let's see what next week brings. Bye.